Okay, in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. So, we're starting a two-part series. By God's grace, we're talking about the potter and his clay, which is the intention behind this topic or this series is to try to. I think whoever was planning this wants us to get the message that, like, accept what happens in your life, accept God, and maybe don't try to question him. But what I want to encourage you to do throughout all this is that you should question God. You should ask him. God is a real being. He wants to connect with you. He wants you to think. He wants you to ask questions, and he has the answers, right? God has the answer for every single question that you will ever ask. There's a little caveat here, which is that we're not always ready for all the answers. And so sometimes we don't get them. And sometimes we see things in the world and things happen in our lives, and we're like, God, how could this happen? How could you let, this person just get hit by a car, or this person die, or this person born with this illness? And it's not that you can't ask the question. It's just that it's just that there's so much that I need to tell you before we get to that. But the point that I want to start off by saying is that God is not against an open mind. God is not against you wanting to understand, okay? So at the beginning of this, if you have a question, you can ask it, and we'll discuss it. So I want to start off by reading some verses, and then we'll talk about how people can commonly misinterpret those verses, why they misinterpret them, like some reasons why, and then how can we better manage pain and struggle in our lives, okay? And if you guys have questions, ask them, okay? All right, Isaiah 64, verse 8. Yet you, Lord, are our Father, we are the clay, you are the potter, we are all the work of your hand. And some people say, okay, we're the work of God's hand, we just got to accept, whatever he molds us into, right? Another verse, Romans 9:21, does not the potter have power over the clay from the same lump to make one vessel for honor and another for dishonor? Romans 9:21. Another one, Job 38, verse 4, God says to Job, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Obviously, it's a rhetorical question. God is saying, I laid the foundations of the earth. You don't know anything. Were you there? No. So that's not what God is saying, right? But God is saying you weren't there, right? So how are you going to know as much as I know? And then Isaiah 55, 8 through 9, it says, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, says the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. So what are some of the messages we're getting here? Honestly, if we're coming into this with a bias towards God is mean, then we're going to say, oh, that means God is forcing bad things on us. But if you just take this very objectively, all God is saying so far is that he has more power than we do. If our parents use power in a bad way, when we hear that statement, God has more power than we do, we're going to be like, all right, that means he's going to hurt us, right? But if God is just saying he's more powerful than we are, if God is just saying he knows more than we know, he's been around for longer than we've been around, then all he's saying is that he's been longer than we've been around, that he has more power than we do, and then he has more knowledge than we have, right? That's all he's saying. He's not saying that he's out to get you. And there are verses that talk about how good he is. So with all that power and knowledge and history and everything, and age or eternity, his eternal nature, then he uses those things for good. But right now, the verses that I've read are only saying more knowledgeable, more powerful, eternal, right? Okay. Any disagreement with that, by the way, so far, from the verses I've read? Because people use these verses to tell us that God is the cause of bad things. All right. So how can some people commonly misinterpret these verses? And I want you guys now to start thinking about your own life. Think about, when you have a problem and people try to comfort you, or you try to rationalize what's going on in my life right now. All of us have experienced down times. All of us have seen people go through things. I think all of us, by our ages here, we've sat in front of someone and they've been telling us a problem and we have nothing to say. Like, there's no words to explain what's happening to them. How people misinterpret these verses. Number one, I have 5 ways. One is, my life is the way it is because of fate, and God is responsible for my fate, right? This is a myth, like a misinterpretation, okay, of these verses. My life is the way it is because of fate. Like, I'm just born and that's it. Like, I'm gonna go through life, but actually I'm not going through life because it's already lived out for me. And like, if I didn't get into that school, if I didn't end up marrying that person or having this much money, or I wasn't this healthy, then that's just fate, you know? That's how people misinterpret these verses. Another misinterpretation is people are born and die as unbelievers because of God. Like, God is the reason why people are born and die as unbelievers. This is another misimplication of these verses. The last 3. It wasn't God's will that I passed this exam, says the person who didn't study, right? Like, oh, it wasn't God's will to pass. Alright, bro, it's not about God's will. Just take it easy with God's will. Don't be so quick to put it on God. It's not God's will that I get married, says the guy who can't even sit down and learn one thing about listening or communication, right? It's not God's will that I don't have children. This one's a tough one, right? I know many people who they cannot, like, their bodies don't let them have children. What is it? Is it because of God's will or not God's will? What is it? So let's go through how we can, why people rush to these implications. Are there any questions right now? Are you guys uncomfortable with this? All right, okay. All right, lots of ways lots of reasons why we can misinterpret the verses these ways. The first thing is, and now guys, start taking this into how you look at life. The first reason is that we forget that the world is broken. The world is a broken place. Okay? Just let that sink in for a second. I think sometimes, and I'm afraid, that we go through life expecting things like the world to not be broken, expecting things to be perfect all the time. But the world is a broken place. People are broken, relationships are broken, cultures are broken, even the church itself. The church, the people of the church, the community of the church. No community, people to come together, are saying that they're perfect, right? Our faith is perfect. The Bible is perfect. God's work in the church is perfect. But the people themselves are not always accepting all those things, right? So, the world is broken, so bad things just happen. We cannot, and I'll get to this later, but we don't always have an explanation for why that one person got hit by that car. We don't have that explanation all the time. We don't have that explanation for, of the 6 billion people, why did this lady be the one born where her reproductive organs aren't working, or the same thing for the guy. We don't have that answer for that one person. But we have the general answer for humanity, right? Which is that God created heaven and earth perfectly. And then, and man was, humans were naming the animals. Adam named the animals, and everything is working in harmony, and everything is beautiful. And then Adam and Eve fell into sin. And once they sinned, so it said before they fell into sin that they were naked and not ashamed, right? And then immediately after they fell into sin, now they're trying to cover their nakedness. Now all of a sudden, this harmony that man had with his own body, that man had with creation, one of the consequences of Adam and Eve falling into sin, it says for the woman, she will be in pain when she's in labor. And the man, he has to work to eat. Before, creation and man were in complete harmony. Now, you see a lion, you're you run the other way, right? And in the Garden of Eden, everything was in complete harmony. But once sin entered into the world, this harmony was disrupted. So now we're scared of animals. Now, like, we're struggling. We got to work. I'm sweating. I'm tired. I'm all this stuff, right? So, and also, people get sick. People just get sick, right? It's a sad thing. Jesus never got sick because he had no sin. Like, we never hear about Jesus getting sick, right? We see that he got tired because he was a human, but he was always like us except sin. So he never got sick, right? All right. So bad things just happen because the harmony that God created is no longer there after the fall. Now we have like earthquakes and tornadoes and volcanoes and all this stuff, right? Let me read a verse, John 9, 1 through 3. Now as Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth. So this guy, like, he didn't do anything wrong. All he did was just be, right? And his disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, neither this man nor his parents, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. We'll get to that last part later. But it says that it's not his fault that he was born blind, and it's not even his parents' fault that he was born blind. I mean, if you really want to blame it on someone, and we're going to get to that later, just this desire to blame a specific thing all the time. But if we want to blame it on someone, we'll put on Adam and Eve. They'll be all right. But like, it just happens, right? Like, even like cells and things don't work perfectly. All right. So the first thing is that we forget that the world is broken. Okay, that's number one. Number two is that naturally, so I'm not trying to say it's a bad like inclination that we all have, but we search for a specific person or thing to blame. Whenever we have a problem, we have a very hard time just letting it go to, okay, life is not perfect, right? We always want to be like, wait, are you saying that I failed my exam because of I didn't study? Shut your mouth. It's not because I didn't study. It's because it wasn't God's will. Or it's because of the devil. The devil moved my pencil the wrong way. Or because, I didn't have breakfast that morning. My mom didn't make it. Like, whatever it is, we want to blame something. We want to blame someone. We got to put it on something, right? Because we were like just working so hard to do it. All right, I'm not going to spend so much time on every single one. The third reason that we have these false ideas about how God works is that we have an unhealthy ignorance of the devil's work in this world and in our lives. In other words, there are two ways to deal with the devil, okay? The first way is to know he's there, but just what's the word? Avoid him or fight with the power of the cross and the resurrection, right? So the first thing is either avoid or fight. This is the first way to deal with the devil, okay? So the devil is coming at you, and you're like you just run. You're like, no, I'm not going to go to that tempting thought, or I'm not going to go to that website, or I'm not going to engage in that conversation. I'm just going to run, right? I don't care, like Joseph did, right? Or you could fight. Like, you have the Jesus prayer, you have the sign of the cross, you have the sacraments, you have a healthy support system, you have prayer, you have all these things, right? So you can fight, and you can fight because God is with you. So that's the first way. The second way to deal with the devil is to just act as if he's not there, in denial. Like, there's no such thing as a devil, right? And some of us, we don't want to accept that there is an evil power against us. But we know that the devil and his angels, meaning when the devil, who was a cherub, fell from heaven because he wanted to be like God and he sinned. And he fell from heaven. He took all these other ranks of angels with him, and they're attacking you. Like, there are forces against you that we don't talk about that much, but they're against you, and they're more powerful than you. All right? They're more powerful than you, right? And that's why we need God. It's not the only reason why we want God, but we need God, because I'm not going to fight the devil by myself. If I try to fight the devil by myself, he'll squish me, I mean, maybe not after I work out, but, no, I'll say, all right. Huh?
Sometimes God lets you find the devil one-to-one when he wants you to overcome him.
Yeah, but in any case, the strength to actually overcome, the victory over the devil, ultimately happened and continues to happen on the cross, right? So defeat the devil through the power of the cross. So I'm fighting. There's no denying that I am in a fight, and we are all fighting the devil. At the same time, we all believe that I will fail, I will be defeated without God in this fight. Okay. So the third reason is because we don't accept that there is the devil out there, right? We don't even think about him that much. Most of us don't think about the devil, right? Some of us, by the way, the other side of this, sometimes we blame everything on the devil, right? Like one time, I think Abu Antonius was telling us this story of somebody who submitted a question to the Pope, and he writes, somebody sent Pope Shenouda a question, and they're like, the devil is attacking me with thoughts of pride, right? And Pope Shenouda looked at this question. He's like, who are you? Are you a monk? Are you like who's like living in the desert, like fasting and doing matanyas all the time? Are you like some saint who's like when you look at something, it's healed or it grows or something? You know, like who do you think you are that like the devil is just on top of you attacking you all the time? And because this guy, he was so proud that he thought he was just under attack by the devil all the time, as opposed to accepting blame for his own faults. Like it's not only the devil that's messing with us. Sometimes we mess with ourselves, right? Like sometimes, I'm not going to blame everything on the devil, but I'm going to blame some things on the devil. And there are other things I need to blame on myself, which might be the next one. Yes, that is the next one. All right, great. I love when that happens. You think I prepared this lesson? I did. All right. So number 4 is unhealthy understandings so a misunderstanding of healthy boundaries between me and God. So we think that God is running our lives. Is God running your life? Is God choosing every step you take? Is God choosing, is God saying, go marry that person, go, get out of here, go marry that person? Is God saying, go to that career, go to that one, and that's it? Like, is that all the conversation is? Or isn't there like an interaction? Isn't there a decision that you make? Don't you choose to follow His will? Don't you choose to ask for His will? Do you think He's always I could be sitting here talking and I could forget my point. Is that always God's thing? Maybe I let myself get distracted. Maybe I didn't sleep enough and I'm not performing as well as I should when I'm serving. Whatever it is, right? So sometimes we think that God is responsible for everything, and sometimes we think the devil is responsible for everything, right? So what I'm trying to say here is that we are not putting blame on ourselves when we should. All right. So which is number 5, that we fail to see our own part of the problem. I have a friend that I love, I love all my friends, but he, somehow, for some reason, every time he talks to me, there's something bad in his life, something bad is happening in his life. And somehow, every time there's something bad in his life, it's always because of someone else. He's fighting with this person. That person is bad. He got hurt. It's because of that person. He's sick. It's because that person did that thing that got him sick. You know? And all the time, whenever he's in an issue, he's always blaming it on someone else. Another thing is the husband, especially in marriage, because this hits real hard in marriage because it's such an intimate connection that you have with someone, that all of a sudden when issues start coming up, it's so easy to say it's because he wants it this way, that's why there's an issue. He wants to set things up this way. If he just did it my way, we would have been fine. There would have been no conflict. Or if she didn't say this, or if she didn't do that, or if she didn't do this, there wouldn't have been no issue with me. It's so easy to put it on that person, and not even so. Sometimes we don't attribute enough blame, and sometimes we attribute no blame on ourselves. Every problem, most problems that we have relationally, are two-sided, right? Or at least relationally, right? All right. There's just a few more reasons, which is we have difficulty accepting that there are real consequences to our actions. So this one is really, really tough. Because some of us here, and it's such a sad thing to say, but some of us are suffering because of mistakes that our grandparents made, right? And because they didn't look far ahead enough to say, if I do make this mistake, my grandkids are going to be suffering. They didn't think like that. They were too short-sighted. But I'm not saying this so we can start blaming our grandparents. The reason why I'm saying this is because I want us to start looking ahead. I want us to realize that we are ultimately immortal beings. Like in the end, we don't die, right? Like we die on earth. But we believe that every human being rises from the dead. And some people rise and they're going to go to heaven. And some people rise and they're going to go to hell. This is like facts, right? This is not anything new. But the point that I'm trying to say is that my actions today affect many, many generations. My decisions are going to affect many people. Like if I choose to be lazy and not study, that's not going to just affect me. That's going to affect my kids. It's going to affect my wife. It's going to affect my service. It's going to affect everything, right? It's going to affect everything. So if I choose to, for example, let's use a one that's a little close to us as Egyptians. If we're just eating fried food all the time, right? That's going to affect my kids, right? Because one day I'm going to be a senior citizen and I'm not going to be able to carry my belly around. I'm just going to be laying in bed just with oil everywhere, just fried food everywhere, right? And they're going to have to take me to the hospital. They're going to have to take me to get whatever tested. They're going to have to do this. So if I'm not taking care of myself now, there are real consequences for my kids. My kids could end up having to work part-time so they can come and take care of me. What if I make bad financial decisions? What if I'm just spending too much and I'm not saving for retirement? Who's going to take care of me when I get sick? What if I don't have life insurance? All this stuff, right? And of course, I haven't said anything. My brothers and sisters, this one is very important. I haven't said anything yet about our decisions for our spiritual lives. What effect are the decisions that we are making about our own relationship with God going to have on our children? What's going to happen to my kids because I cannot pray every day? Because I fail to do the hard work of praying every day. Who is going to teach my kids when I have kids about God? Who is going to pray with them? If I can't even get myself to pray every day, who's going to get them to pray every day when they can't even tell time, when they can't manage a schedule? There are real consequences to our actions. Do you guys get what I'm saying? So a part of the reason why we put so much blame on God or are so quick to say it's fate or it's God's will or it's God's this is because we are having such a hard time accepting that, hey, I'm eating this bad thing and I've been doing it for 3 years now, or I haven't been able to take communion for a whole year. That's the reason why I'm suffering. We don't want to put this on ourselves. Real consequences. All right. We have 3 more, and then how should we handle pain and struggles in our lives? Any questions so far?
How you interpret pain?
I don't know.
Because the way, the perspective you take it, the way you understand it. But there are many ways to interpret pain. For example, there are some signs, some good signs for having pain. If you don't have the pain of hunger, you're not going to eat. If you don't have that pain for thirst, you're not going to look for water.
Yeah.
Okay?
Actually, I really like what you're saying, because what you're doing right now is called reframing, which is you're taking the concept and you're making us look at the same concept in a very different way, which is what I want to do at the end, actually. So, but pain for now is an unpleasant feeling, let's just say. But because hunger is not the most pleasant thing, right? Unless you like hurting yourself. So,
just an example.
Yeah, it's a good example. No, of course. I mean, you put your hand in a fire, you're gonna feel pain, and that pain you're gonna remember it, and you're not gonna do it again. So the pain had a good outcome, right? And we'll get to that about how we should handle pain. Are you guys with me? Yes? All right, good. All right, the last 3 things for why we misinterpret verses like this is that we don't want to do the work that is required for real healing. So we ignore the fact that we can ourselves be better. Like, let's just use some examples that are a little far, they may not be the most like closest to us. Let's say a husband and wife are fighting, right? And then and they're just, for years, they're just not having a great relationship. And then somebody tells them, like, you're going through a lot, you're gonna need to go see a therapist. You're gonna need 10 sessions, it's gonna cost like $1,000, $1,500, and you're gonna have to go and you're gonna have to talk about uncomfortable things. You're gonna have to talk about feelings. What's a feeling, right? You have to talk about your past family history and all this stuff. Or, hey, there's something wrong with your body. It's gonna get worse and worse and worse if you don't deal with it. You have to go to have surgery, right? And it's gonna cost this much money or whatever. A lot of times what happens is that you say, oh my gosh, like, does that mean that for me to get better, I have to do all this work, all of it? Why can't I just be like this, right? Why can't I just sit like this and let it just, I'm too comfortable in this dump that I'm in, right? I'm too comfortable, right? I've been in it for 20 years. Can I do the work? Sometimes we don't want to do the work. All right. And the last two things, so the first and the last two things is that we have a misunderstanding of the nature of God and how God works. So some of us, it's just a plain misunderstanding, right? Let me read a verse here from James chapter 1, verses 13 to 17. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am tempted by God. So he's saying, if you're tempted, don't say, I'm tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted by evil, so God himself can't be tempted by evil, nor does he himself tempt anyone. So this is fact, right? So the Bible says that God does not tempt anyone. So if you think that God is the reason why you're like falling into sin, it says here, the temptation is not coming from God, right? But each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. Then, when desire has conceived, so like you have this desire and then you start indulging in it, like you start doing things to move towards the thing you desire. It gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, brings forth death. Of course, because the wages of sin is death. Do not be deceived, my beloved brethren. So we're going to get another fact about God, okay? Another fact about God. So the first fact about God is that God does not tempt anyone, okay? The other fact about God, every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning. So we have a fact that God does not tempt anyone, and we're getting another fact that's saying that actually every good thing comes down from the Father of lights, from heaven, from God, from your Father. We say this, by the way, also in Tasbih, when we say the doxology of Archangel Michael. So, all right, so you have a misunderstanding of the nature of God and how God works. And the last thing is, which, I can give you a funny example, is we magnify our struggles by being too attached to materialistic things. Like, if anybody here has ever been wedding planning, like, you will be amazed at how important the little decoration on the little cake that no one sees, that's under the frosting, how important that little decoration is, that one, right? And no one sees. And if it's not there, even though you can't see it, and you're not even going to know it's there, if it's not there, I hate my life, I'm going to die, this is not working, I'm a failure, whatever. All this hard work, blah, 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 once in a lifetime, whatever, right? But of course we have so many other things. Somebody dented my car. I lost, $100. Just lost $100. Or I can't find my jeans. Or whatever, right? Sometimes we magnify our struggles. So our struggles, like this little itty bitty struggle, is now this big, and it's God's fault, right? Why, God? Why didn't you save me from this? Why didn't you? I prayed, let your will be done. Isn't it your will that my wedding cake is perfect, right? So sometimes we magnify our struggles. All right. So let me just list them one more time. I'm not going to explain all of them. So we forget that the world is broken, we naturally search for a specific person or thing to blame, we have an unhealthy ignorance of the devil's work in this world and in our lives. We have a misunderstanding of healthy boundaries between me and God. We fail to see our own part of the problem. We have difficulty accepting that there are real consequences to our actions and that we're immortal beings. The next number 7 is we don't want to do the work that is required for real healing, so we just completely ignore the fact that we ourselves can actually be just better people, right? We misunderstand the nature of God and how God works. And number 9, I don't know, I'm like doing this as if it's like I'm counting up to 9, but I'm not. We magnify our struggles by being too attached to materialistic things, okay? All right. Any questions so far? Because now I'm going to talk about how some simple ways, or 6 ways, that we can handle the pain and struggle in our lives. Any questions? Okay. All right. So the first thing we should do to handle pain and struggles in this life, just to be very clear, I'm not saying necessarily how to solve the pain and struggles. A young man had like a disease or something in his leg, and he had to have a part of his leg amputated. Most likely, God is not going to do a miracle to bring his leg back, right? So he just has to live with this. That's it. I already told you examples of couples who can't have children. Or maybe your relationship with your parents wasn't that great. And it's the past is the past. You cannot change it, right? Maybe you're taller or shorter. Maybe you have a disease you were born with. Maybe no matter what happens, you're just not gonna become a doctor, right? Like no matter what happens, you just can't focus enough on all that stuff, right? All right. So how should I handle? Number 1 is accept that pain and temptation and struggling are a part of life. So when we leave here, I want you to know, that's it. Manage your own expectations. My life is going to have pain and struggle. So if the first thing that I feel when I have an issue is, I'm going to die, I can't have issues, right? If that's the first thing you're going to feel, then you haven't managed your own expectations well. So, let me read you 2 verses. John 16:33. Jesus Christ himself, who is God, said this. These things I have spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation. Period. It's a promise. He is not saying, I will give you tribulation, right? But he's saying you will have tribulation. Promise, right? But be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. Got it. That's it. All right, okay, you're sick. It really stinks. I'm going to support you. And you know what? On top of that, I overcame the world. That's what God says, right?
So how can this correspond to being ambitious? Do you mean that I'm supposed to accept anything bad coming to me in my life and say, oh yeah, that's my fate. That's God's will.
Yeah. I think from the very beginning, actually, I said the same thing. That I'm saying the opposite of that, right? That it's not about if something bad happens. All right, something bad happened. What exactly does it mean for me? I can't be so quick to say that it's God's will that this bad thing happened to me. My life is over, right? We have to go through work. We have to do real work when we face challenges. You can't just accept that your life, you can't give up or lose your life because of challenges. You have to continue. Because you don't know, and as we will see in some of the other examples, that you don't know what God is going to do with this challenge. And actually, a thing I've been thinking lately is every time I face a challenge, I'm saying, you know what? Now God is giving me more things that He will use for me to glorify Him. And that's exactly what happened with the blind man. We'll go back to the verse with the blind man. It says, who sinned? This man or his parents that he was born blind? In other words, the world is a broken place. Sin entered the world. There's no harmony between creation and man anymore, or there's less harmony. So it happens that people get sick. So it's not God's fault that this man was born blind. But God didn't stop there and say, oh, you're born blind, your life stinks. That's it. Sorry. See you later. Actually, God said, you know what? I'm going to come and I'm going to take flesh and I'm going to heal you. So it wasn't God's fault that the man is born blind. And it wasn't his fault. And it wasn't his parents' fault. It's none of those three people's faults. But God solved the problem anyway. And now this man, for the rest of his life, is walking around being a witness, a true witness. He himself is evidence of the work of God. His own eyes are evidence of the work of God. Yes.
Like I had a conversation with my friend about this kind of thing, like why other people should suffer for a sin that was committed by our ancestors years ago, right? And they say we describe God as a just God, as a faithful God, and he follows through his covenant. So if he's a just God, why? I'm just explaining to you what their questions are. If he's a just God, why should a person that hasn't sinned nor have his parents sinned be judged or have a sin, a calamity or a problem happen to him because someone else is the question?
Yeah, the thing is, the problem is we're putting God too much into the equation. Like, God left us to our own free will. We screwed it up. And now God is trying to help us. But if I go and I contract AIDS, for example, that's going to mess with my kids' lives, right? My decision. So just think about that, right? There are benefits and there are consequences, like disadvantages, for your decisions. Do you guys get what I'm saying? So actually, if I worked very hard and we all see this all the time. If I work very hard right now, like I'm a first generation born in America in my family, and I work very hard and I can have a good career and I study and all that stuff and I save money and I invest well and I'm not too risky and I have lots of money, my kids are going to benefit from that. They're going to get that benefit. If I work on my spiritual life right now and I prepare myself to become a parent, my kids are going to benefit from that. In the same exact way, if I go and screw up my life and then I foolishly decide to have children when my life is screwed up, they're going to have to suffer from that. In other words, God has healthy boundaries. He's telling you, I will help you be well. I will heal you. I will make you better. I will do it. God is promising to accompany you every step of the way in your life and to reveal His will to you as much as it will benefit you, so that your kids can benefit and all the generations and all your seed forever can benefit. And that's the way life is. But I say, no, God, I don't want your will to be done. And God's going to say, hey, I promised you all these benefits, bro. I promised them. They're there. Just take them. And I say no. So there's got to be consequences. Yes.
But you can't also be selective where it might want to involve God. You can't say, if you screw up your life, don't blame God. But then when you screw up your life, you also say, well, you need to go back to God. And, because you went away from God, this happened to you. You still involve God when bad things happen, so you can't be selective.
Oh no, I'm not saying I involve. I was using the word involve a little loosely. I mean
But even with situations where it's unfortunate, they always say, well, God wanted me to be that way.
And I'm saying they shouldn't say that. I'm saying that that's wrong. That God does not want you to be sick. God does not want you to fail in your life. He doesn't want you to fall to temptation. He doesn't want you to sin. Does that help, guys? Up and open? Is that okay? Any more questions?
Yeah, but there is a trick point here.
Yeah.
Yeah, God is all good, definitely, and everything He wants is good. But sometimes He allows things wrong to happen in my life or bad to happen in my life for the good later. The born blind man is a typical example of that. He was born blind and he did not do anything bad or wrong or sin. There is something good that came out of this. So maybe something bad now that God has allowed it, because He is good, so something good is going to come out of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think we're all saying the same thing.
As the whole God, everything God does is good. That's true, man, because He is good. Sometimes things happen in my life that are not good now, but can be good later.
Yes. And what I'm trying to say is that those things that are not good, that God allowed to happen, are not sourced from God. It's not God's fault that this man was blind. It's not God's fault that, I'm getting sick all the time.
Allowed by God.
It's allowed by God.
It's not,
yeah. But allowed by God is just saying that God is honoring His word. That God said the wages of sin is death. Creation, like the harmony got destroyed. People get sick. People suffer.
So you're saying it's allowed by God, but it's not brought from God.
Yes.
So then, if it's not brought from God, why are we associating God with him? Why are you saying it just doesn't make sense? You're saying.
I agree with you. Keep talking.
I'm just I'm a little confused. So you're saying it's allowed, but it's not associated with it.
It's not source. God is not the source of the bad
He
thing.
did not do it,
Yeah.
but he allowed it. The teacher who fails you did not do it, but he allowed it.
Yeah. Marty, let's think of an example, right? Like I love you very much, and you say, hey, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna, I have no money and I'm in debt, and I'm gonna go spend all my money on this thing. I'm gonna say, I really don't think it's a good idea. I have some recommendations if you're willing to hear them, but you're free to do whatever you want, and it's gonna affect you in such and such ways. And this has nothing to do with my love for you, but go ahead. I can't do it because that's how love works.
It's the same story of the prodigal son.
Yep.
He let him go
Yep.
because he loved him, although that's not what he wants, but he allowed it to happen because he loved him.
It's yeah.
Everything will work for good.
All right, don't take my notes away. I was trying to. I'm supposed to close on
Relax,
that.
cozy.
I'm supposed to close on that, and you're saying the
Relax,
verse.
cozy. Let people, let devils, let everybody do whatever you want. You are with Jesus. You relax and you happy. End of the story.
Yes. Okay. So, all right. Are we good? Is everybody at peace in their hearts right now with what we're talking about? All right, because we had a good tangent, but it takes us right back to where we are, which is great. All right. So the first thing we said is, how do I handle or manage the pain and struggles in my life? The first thing is really managing my expectations, accepting that pain, temptation, and struggling are a part of life. Okay? All right. Number 2, also remember that God manages and sees problems differently, right? Remember that God manages and sees problems differently. And this relates to what everyone is saying. Some verses. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to His purpose. Because if I leave my life in God's hands, if I say, God, I don't know what your will is, but let your will be done, and I surrender to you, and I give my life into His hands, there's the devil, there's the disharmony in this broken world, there's so many other factors, and my own desires that I'm still fighting, right? All those things come together, and they're attacking my life, but which is in God's hands. So God is going to make all things work together for the good. Okay? God is going to make all things work together for the good. Again, it's mysterious to understand, exactly why does working together for the good for me mean one thing than working together for the good for Michael? Why does it mean different things? There's too many factors, we already said, right? There's just so many factors. All right. But as for you, and this was Joseph, what he said. So again, I'm trying to get to the point that God sees and manages problems very differently. Okay? As for you, you meant evil against me. He's talking to his brothers who sold him into slavery. You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive. Joseph, God didn't make his brothers go attack him and throw him into the pit and take his colorful robe and deceive his father. God didn't do that. But Joseph continued every second. He's submitting to God, surrendering to God. And in the end, God used this same bad circumstance for good.
Right.
Does it mean that if the famine was going to happen in Egypt, and the only way God knew how to solve the famine was through Joseph? We can't redo history, right? But God, we already know that God is more powerful, more knowledgeable. He's eternal, right? So he could have solved these problems in many different ways. But the point is, when I'm Joseph and I'm looking at my life, all I see is God has turned this evil circumstance into good. Okay?
You're going to bless a nation.
Yes.
Remember that. A whole nation be blessed by you in Jesus' name.
The next thing about God seeing problems differently is this one. I want us to this one is very like tangible, right? Or not. So he called his disciples to himself and said to them, "Assuredly I say to you that this poor widow has put in more than all those who have given to the treasury." Think about this, right? This woman is poor. She's poor. Like, just imagine, like, when I come to church and I put money out of my job, like I put whatever sum of money, and some poor person, actually maybe sometimes I know there's like a person begging right outside our church, and they're asking for money. And imagine this person takes from the 20 or 30 or whatever dollars, and he takes and he puts it all into the church. Like, he's begging in front of the church to give to the church. God, when God looks at that, God's not taking out his calculator or pulling up Microsoft Excel and using functions and doing stuff, right? God is saying, wait, this person here put in more than all the other people. What does that tell us? It tells us that when God looks at our problems, his calculations, his assessment, his judgment of what's going on is so different than anything that we can do. All right.
Can I give a short example? Like an athlete or somebody who is a big champ in sports, okay? He has to go in a very tight schedule, all right? That causes pain for him to end up into what? Being a big champ. You don't want to do it, you are not going to get it. Bye.
Peace out.
All
All right. So I have 4 more things and we'll be done, like about how we should manage problems, right? So we said the first thing is accept that these things are a part of life. Number 2, remember that God manages and sees problems differently. Number 3 is do not be afraid to contend with God and ask for resolution of the problem. Do not be afraid to say, God, solve this problem. Like, help me. There's a verse that I didn't put here, and I think it's Isaiah 45 verse 11. God says, concerning the things, or I'm sorry if I'm not saying it completely right, but concerning the things of the sons of men, you command me. God is saying to his people, you command me. Tell me what you want. And he said, seek and you will find. Ask and it will be given to you. Right? So, like, when you're facing these problems, you have to ask God for a solution. You have to tell him, God, I know that you love me. I know that I am more important to you than I am to myself. Like, you love me more than I love myself. And I know that you created me. And I know that you promised me all these things. And I know that you're with me. And I know that you're here right now. So answer my prayer. Help me. Can you not say that to God? Is God not able to hear that prayer from you?
He is.
He is, right?
Joseph is not better than you.
God will hear your prayer. So ask, contend with, and say, God, why did you let this happen? You remember Jacob when he fought with God? You guys remember when Jacob wrestled with God? You guys know that story? Yes. I need some affirmation. It's my love language. So, God wrestled with Jacob. And Jacob said, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. Right? You see, the problem is, guys, I'm not saying ever to be disrespectful with God. But my concern is that we're not being ourselves with God. We're not being bold with God. We're not holding God accountable. We're not telling him, repeating to him what he told us. The problem is that he promises us something and we don't even believe it. So we don't even live according to that promise. He says, be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. I'm going to say, God, you overcame the world. Tell him his promise, right? It's a conversation. Be bold with God. Tell him what you want. Ask him, what do you want? Tell yourself right now, what do I want? And is it about think also, is it about materialistic things, like I want a car, I want this? Maybe, I hope you put in the list of the things you want some spiritual benefit somewhere, right? I want to follow you, God. I want your will to be done in my life. I want to come closer to you. I want forgiveness for my sins. I want to repent. I want to forgive this other person. I want to be less angry. You said, God, that you are a healer, that you would help me. I'm your creation. Create in me a clean heart. You see how the Bible speaks in these imperative statements? It says, create in me a clean heart. This is a prayer. How firmly is David speaking to God when he says, you are a creator. You created heaven and earth. Create in me a clean heart, oh God. Renew a right spirit within me. David is not messing around because he knows God can, right? And this is like music to God's ears. He sees his children asking for a clean heart and a right spirit. If my kids, I don't even know. I don't have kids, so I don't know what it's like, but you know what I'm saying. All right. So number 4 is seek to find a way to grow through the challenge. And this I'll read from 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 20 to 21. But in a great house there are not only vessels of gold and silver, but also of wood and clay. So this is for the people who say, oh, the clay vessels and God makes ones for dishonor or whatever, right? So to balance this out, or to complete the teaching of the Bible, therefore if anyone cleanses himself from the latter we just read is dishonor. If anyone cleanses himself from the latter, he will be a vessel for honor, sanctified and useful for the master, prepared for every good work. So God is making vessels. And remember, the problem is when we imagine these examples, we think oh, God took some clay and he made it into something, and here you go, a vessel for honor. Here you go, vessel for dishonor, right? But we don't spend enough time thinking about the time that the potter is sitting there, molding, right? You have the wheel, right? And he has his fingers there and he's working and working and working and working. That working and working and working and working, that's your life. That's your decisions. You are making decisions right now where God's hands are in the clay and the clay is wet and ready and moist and malleable, and you just throw a rock in there like sin, right? And God now has to work around it. And you throw another rock failing to pray, and you keep going. And now God is trying to make it a vessel of honor. He's working real hard, and I have a verse at the end about that. He's working real hard, right? So that's why it says you cleanse yourself from dishonor. Work hard to get the dishonor out. Okay? All right. The last 2 things are, remember how God has helped you in the past. So frequently, and I'm saying this to myself, who am one of the most anxious people, right? Or always on edge about something, right? So remember that God has never failed you in your life. Maybe the world has failed you. Maybe sin has failed you. Maybe your friends have failed you. Maybe you failed yourself. But has God ever failed you in his own promises? And if you think he has, contend with God and ask him to answer that for you. Talk to him. But God has always resolved my problems. I still have problems that he hasn't resolved, of course, right? That I'm praying that he resolves. But until those things are not resolved, so until I die with those problems not resolved, and I will never find an answer in eternity, wherever I'm going to be. Right now, he's solved my problems, right? And maybe some other ones are just taking longer to solve. The last thing is, surround yourself with faithful people. Sometimes the challenge you face is allowed simply to bring you and others closer. Sometimes you see, I get so focused on the challenge that I have, but actually through this challenge, I really clung to some people in my church, my friends, whatever it was. And that benefit of clinging to the church or finding a healthy support group and nurturing that support group is so much greater than the benefit of not having that problem. Do you guys get what I'm saying? If you didn't have that problem, you'd just be without that problem. But if you had that problem, you'd have a whole support system, right? And maybe God allowed this problem so that you can get all this benefit. Because otherwise you would have just been a person without that problem, as opposed to a person with this huge support system and a problem solved. The last verse I want to read is the word which came to Jeremiah from the Lord saying, this is Jeremiah 18, 1-6. So, just so you know, like a lot of times what God would do with prophets is he would have them do something or like live out the message, right? Or witness the message or be part of the message. So he told him, arise and go to the potter's house. There was a potter. He said, arise, go to the potter's house. And there I will cause you to hear my words. Then I went down, this is Jeremiah speaking now. Then I went down to the potter's house, and there he was making something at the wheel. And the vessel that he made of clay was marred in the hand of the potter. So like he was trying to make it, but it wasn't coming out good. So he made it again into another vessel as it seemed good to the potter to make. So he took the vessel that was marred and he improved it into something that was good in his own eyes. Then the word of the Lord came to me saying, O house of Israel. So remember, this is now God talking to all of Israel. We already know that not all of Israel was all honorable, right? O house of Israel, can I not do with you as this potter? Says the Lord, look, as the clay is in the potter's hand, so are you in my hand, O house of Israel. So in other words, what God is saying is that if this human potter is going to take this clay vessel and he's going to see that it's not working out and he's going to work hard to make it work out to something good, God is saying, imagine me who created you, who loves you. You are my people. I will make you into a great vessel, even better than any human potter can make. Any questions? Okay, glory be to God forever. Amen.